On this episode of Lapeef, Let's Talk.
A lot of times, to be honest, in how that plays out in real life, that intent becomes irrelevant. In most cases, it becomes irrelevant. Like, you could have, again, to Courtney's point, you can have good intentions, but the impact, what we are left with, what the stain is, what the tattoo and residue of those actions, what they cause, like, that's what you're going to pay attention to. And that's what a lot of times you either reap the rewards of the impact, or you deal with the consequences and have to repair the impact in some instances. So for me personally, I tend to look at the impact more so than the intent. And I do understand that they work hand in hand.
If you're just tuning in, welcome to Lapeef, Let's Talk. Make sure you guys get these likes up. Moving on to our third topic, which is intent versus impact. Intent versus impact. Intent is the purpose, determined to do something, and impact is having a strong effect on someone or something. This is a good topic because I often feel as though some people focus on the impact and not the intent, and vice versa. Some people focus on the intent and not the impact, but they do play together. So let's talk about it. Intent versus impact. I'm gonna start with you, Kay. What are your thoughts?
I think intent is really important. I know that things are even perceived as worse when the intent is negative, or if there's ill intent. Even if it's the exact same impact, people view the impact as worse if they know the intent was ill. I read something about that before. I know that, like, even in law, intent and impact, it's like murder versus manslaughter. The sentence for involuntary manslaughter is way less than first-degree murder or second-degrry murder, because the intent was not to kill. So intent is extremely, extremely important. I like if I'm walking down the street and someone accidentally steps on my shoe, it's like, oh, okay, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. But if someone just walks up and steps on my foot, like, it's a whole different situation. So impact is important and should definitely be acknowledged to the victim of said, action. But the intention is really important as well.
Courtney,
but how can you? But hold on, JR. But how can you determine what the intent is?
You can't.
It depends. I think it depends. You can ask depending on the relationship with the person, or you can use your judgment and know if something was just a mistake or if something was purposefully done to hurt you or something like that. It depends. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes there's just no way to know. But sometimes you can have a conversation, like if it's your friend or family member or something like that, or even online or something, you can just ask. Or I think asking is the best way when you have the ability to do so, but sometimes you do have to use your judgment because that's not always the case. You can't always ask.
Did she answer your question?
I disagree.
You disagree with what?
I think impact is more important than intent. The only intent that I can for sure know is mine. I don't know what your intent is, but the impact is the action of that intent. So if it's impactful in my life, it doesn't necessarily matter what the intent was. So I think we need to focus on that. I think a lot of times people's intent might be good, but it's a biblical saying, the roads to hell is paved with good intentions. So you can have all this greatness, but if it's impactful and it's a negative on my life, then your intent doesn't matter. So making moves, it not being, logically thought of, making moves emotionally, even though your intent wasn't to hurt. However, the impact is hurtful and it's going to hurt you. And who knows, how in the long run, how that might be impactful. You need to look at that. So before your intent, you need to think, you need to see, am I moving off emotions? If I am, let me get someone that's unbiased to kind of help me make a decision before I make something rash where I'm doing it intentfully right out of emotions, but the impact is so damaging that it can damage a whole lot of other stuff than what you meant it for. So impact is extremely more important than your intent. Many times have you heard, well, my intentions was good. Well, my intentions were good. Well, it doesn't matter. You stepped in my shoes are right now messed up because you wasn't looking the correct way. So now I'm out. Are you going to pay for my shoes? You're not going to pay for the impact of you being, frivolously or just doing something without thinking. So no, your impact matters more. So therefore, make sure your intent is clear. It's just, and think of what might happen of that outcome. And I think that's a big problem. We don't think before we do stuff. We don't get good counsel before we do stuff. We just do it off willy-nilly and think, well, because I didn't mean it, that the impact is going to lessen the blow. No, it doesn't. Sometimes sorry doesn't cut it.
Sometimes they don't even say sorry.
That's real. And they don't.
AK, you want to respond or follow up?
Yeah. I think it depends on the thing, right? When you were talking, Courtney, I'm thinking of like some horrible thing that caused like some terrible damage. When you were kind of talking, really? I was thinking about like something that would be really impactful. In that case, I would definitely agree that the impact is the biggest thing. Like either way, that has caused irreparable damage to my whatever, right? So in that case, me as the victim of whatever the thing is, the impact is more important. But I think in general, if we're talking about more lighthearted things, I think intent matters a lot. I guess I'll say it like that. And if you're a victim of something, you get to decide which is more important for you. That is your right. If you're the victim of anything, you get to decide how you feel about it. Like the perpetrator of the thing cannot assign that feeling to you and say, oh, well, my intention was this. They can let you know their intentions so that maybe that might make you feel a little bit better. But at the end of the day, you get to decide how you feel about said impact.
But sometimes the impact doesn't necessarily just affect another person. The impact will affect you. And even though your intent is well, that impact could indirectly or directly affect you. And so that's kind of like the problem. It's like, no, you think before you move. Don't move off emotions. Emotions is always going to get you into something that you don't want. Like we don't use our head enough. We don't go to our circle to get opinions enough before we move. But intent, I don't really care about your intent. The impact is more important because that's the action of what has happened. You can have your good intent all together, but however, the impact, if it's negatively affecting my life, that's the core issue.
Why do you think that murder has a harsher sentence than manslaughter?
What's the impact of murder? Someone lost a life. It
manslaughter,
might mean
they lost a life too.
Right. The impact is more important. Your intent might not have been to kill, and so it might have a lesser sentence, but on those victims, that parents that might have lost a son off manslaughter, would it have mattered if it was manslaughter or murder in the first degree? The son is still dead. That impact still holds true.
I agree with that. I'm saying, why do you think that the sentence is harsher for murder than it is for manslaughter? Because it is. You go to jail for longer for murder than for involuntary manslaughter, even though the person is dead.
Yeah, that's law. And I mean, you can debate that with good lawyers or whatever, but what is the impact? The impact is a loss of life. The impact is someone could have lost a parent. Someone could have lost a son. That impact, regardless of how long they stay in jail, doesn't change the impact of the situation that is a life gone.
I'm going to go to Chicago Rella. Intent versus impact. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's going to be real short for me. I think, men tend to look at results, tend to be result driven. So you're going to look at the impact versus the intent. And again, to give Anton his just due and his props, when you watch his channel, he talks a lot about you know, being on your purpose and things of that nature. And so, you know, in that regard, I'll give you this, bro. You are consistent with what you stand for and what you stand on. You're definitely consistent. You can go, I think you started your channel in 2015. You can go all the way back then to the Who is Anton Daniels video, and you see where the basic framework for your logic in terms of nobody cares about your excuses. Nobody cares about, you know, why this didn't happen or why did that happen. Nobody cares about any of that. So a lot of times, to be honest, and how that plays out in real life, that intent becomes irrelevant. In most cases, it becomes irrelevant. Like, you could have, again, to Courtney's point, you can have good intentions, but the impact, what we are left with, what the stain is, what the tattoo and residue of those actions, what they cause, like, that's what you're going to pay attention to. And that's what a lot of times you either reap the rewards of the impact, or you deal with the consequences and have to repair the impact in some instances. So for me personally, I tend to look at the impact more so than the intent. And I do understand that they work hand in hand. Like, you begin with the intent and build on that, but the focus always have to be at the end of that tunnel. What is the impact?
Mm-hmm.
Anton, intent versus impact. What are your thoughts?
First, let me say I appreciate you, Rilla, for giving me that shout out, bro. But it is, and I'm still consistent with that same narrative, is that the only thing that matters is the results. I think that when we talk about sentencing and things like that, I think that that's more or less something that they're doing to appease people, right? Because you also have to take into account that politicians and lawmakers and all of these people generally making these decisions are literally just a reflection of the people that vote for them. So if you think about the people that's in office and the decisions that they make, or whether or not you agree with them or disagree with them, they are just a reflection of the communities that they serve. So if you take that out of the equation, somebody's son is still dead. Mm-hmm. And I don't care how much you meant to do the right thing, because I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I meant this," or, you know, "I would have did this," or "I really wanted to be." Yo, you did a lot of stuff that was wrong, and it resulted in bad results. And the only thing that matters for me, the only thing that matters is the results. Like, we can talk about all of the intent, we can talk about how you got there, we can, because honestly, like, even if you talk about success stories, whether you talking about somebody that you follow or that you like, the only reason you rocking with them in the first place is because they have the results. Then you go back and look at the journey and you say, okay, well, how did you get there? Or let me figure out why it is that I like you and how I can attach myself to your story and use that in my life in order to elevate myself. Whether you're looking at it from a positive perspective or a negative perspective, people care about the results first, and then they start to attach themselves to the story or the journey or why you did what you did as a result of the narrative that you paint behind it. But the only thing that matters to me, the only thing that matters is the results. Is winners and is losers. And you only get one chance to do the right thing in most situations, especially as it relates to life. You get one chance, you get one shot. And the only thing that's going to matter at the end of it is not the intent, but the results that came along with it. That's it for me. It's only the results, the impact.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate it.